again, thanks so much for being here. Um, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Pete Neubig, and I was the co-founder of Empire Industries, a property management firm from 12 to 19. We sold it and became the vice president for Mind, left there, started VPM Solutions. And if you don't know, I'm also the host of the NARPM Radio. So if you don't know that we have NARPM Radio, go to narpm.org and then there's the radio button. You click on there and you can actually hear. We have, I think, a podcast each week. Okay, so before I talk about the whole remote thing, what they can do, I want to just kind of set the scene for everybody. So it's around 2015, and Empire is in big growth mode. We went from 100 to 300 units, and that took us over 3 years. But now in 2015, we're finding ourselves really growing rapidly. We had higher BDMs, and we were taking on good clients, bad clients, redlining contracts, all the stuff that NARPM tells you not to do, we were doing. And this was causing great stress on the infrastructure of the team itself. And what we were finding is as we were growing, we needed so many properties to become profitable, but we were stressing the team out. And every time somebody would be ready to leave, or somebody, the team was super stressed, they were crying uncle, we had to hire somebody. And when we hired that person, we would be in the red again, and we would actually be unprofitable until we got more properties. And we was kind of like this seesaw deal. And so we really needed to get off this seesaw. And one day I promoted this one lady named Linda, and Linda was our front office person. We moved her to a maintenance coordinator gave her a raise and everything. And within 2 weeks, Linda said she needed more money. The challenge we had was that the people that we were hiring here locally, you got to remember, this is before the pandemic. So we're hiring people. They were coming to what's called an office. I don't know if everybody has offices anymore, but coming to an office. And to get people to come to an office for the amount that we could pay them, that the business could afford, we weren't getting the top of the heap type folks. And we're getting a lot of people that had a lot of challenges inside their personal life, and they would bring them to our office. And so it was very hard to run profitably. And then it was also hard to find good people. So I couldn't find anybody good. And I was having this profitability challenge. So this was the decision that I decided, okay, maybe remote is the solution. But when I started thinking about hiring remote, I had tons of questions, mindset challenges, and some of them were, how do I know if they're actually going to work? Because they're not in the office. Now, today, nobody really is in an office. A lot of people are remote, whether they're in the US or abroad. But the way we solved it back then was we had everybody on a video screen in the bullpen, and we had key performance indicators, and we had weekly calls with each one of our virtual team members to go over the KPIs. We also made sure they were on video, and we also had an instant messaging. We use Slack today. The bigger question was, how's my existing team going to feel, right? As we moved to remote, a lot of people thought that their job was going to be in jeopardy. And what we actually did is we let our team know that they would get elevated. And so as we hire a remote team to do some of the low enjoyment tasks, and we'll get into what they were doing, my property management team was able to elevate and ultimately make more money and become part of management. How do I find them? Back in 2015, there wasn't VPM Solutions. Today, you can go to vpmsolutions.com, and there's 37,000 people, all with various certifications in property management, looking to work in property management. Back then, yeah, if you found one person, you would just basically ask them if they had any friends or relatives that they wanted to come work for you. So you had a really, really small pool of talent to choose from, but you took what you can get. And then what do we pay them? How do we pay them? And so again, there was no VPM Solutions platform to pay people. So we had to figure it out just by trial and error. Back then, I think we were paying people in Mexico $6 an hour. Today, it's closer to $10 an hour. So inflation is just not in the US. It's actually happening all over the world. What can they actually do? I'm going to table this one because I'm going to answer that one on the next slide. How do we communicate with them? We used voice over IP phones. Even back then, we used instant messaging. And then the other thing was, I was really worried about our culture. I thought we had a great culture at Empire, even though it was one of stress. No one left us though, because they really enjoyed the culture. And I really needed to extend that. And the way we did it was we pushed our culture across wires. We literally pushed it when we had company meetings, one-on-one meetings, and we gave our team abroad, our remote team, ownership and accountability on what they were doing. And I think that was a big difference that we started doing early on that I think a lot of people are adopting now. We didn't just give them a checklist and say, just do these check marks. We gave them a job role and said, you're responsible for this job role. You have the ability to make it better. As long as you follow our policies, you can update and modify the process. We want you to take complete ownership and we want you to come up with ways on how to make it better. And so that really allowed us to extend our culture. So what can they do? Well, these are actually the 16 job roles that we hired for our virtual team. So we we had a maintenance supervisor because we had 4 maintenance coordinators. And so we need somebody to manage the maintenance coordinators. And so we were one of the first companies that I know of, because I talked to a bunch of y'all out there that actually had quote unquote management as remote team members as management. So nobody in the US actually managed the maintenance coordinators. Maintenance coordinators was actually managed by the maintenance supervisor that was in Mexico. The maintenance coordinator was the first position that we hired. And the reason why was that was the one that was giving us the most pain. We were getting crushed. Had a high churn rate. The average churn rate in property management is around 20 to 22% based on NARPM figures. Mine was about 34%. So, and mainly due to unhappiness due to maintenance. People weren't renewing their leases. Owners were firing us because of maintenance or lack of maintenance or how we're handling it. Also, my property managers told me that they spend over 80% of their time on maintenance. So that was what we tackled first. And I can tell you that it took us about 90 days and a lot of breaking of eggs to make this omelet to get these maintenance coordinators trained up so that they can handle, 90% of all maintenance calls. And so when we were done, it took us about 90 to 120 days, where by the end of it, 90% of all maintenance calls were handled by the team in Mexico, and then 10% would be escalated to the property managers. And so my property managers now had a huge amount of time to work on other things other than maintenance. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we moved them to. But then once we had the 4 coordinators, we needed a supervisor. The supervisor made sure that if somebody was on vacation, they could fill in. The supervisor took care. So the maintenance coordinators did the maintenance calls. They handled it, right? And they coordinated maintenance. The supervisor was the one who onboarded vendors, took vendor issues that got escalated, handled any escalations from the maintenance coordinators, even from owners or residents. It went to them first before it went to a property manager. So this again alleviated a lot of the property manager's time. We eventually hired a turn coordinator, which this was the last job that we gave up because our property managers were still walking properties back then. We eventually stopped that. The turn coordinator was really, for me, was the hardest position to give to a remote team member. But once we decided what a turn was, right? It's carpet, paint, maid service, and small items inside the property. Anything above that went to maintenance coordination. So if a fence was down, that wasn't part of the turn. That was maintenance coordination. Anything major, we decided that was a maintenance coordinator. So the turn coordinator was really focusing on just the set things that we did for every turn, including keys and locks and stuff like that. And that took us probably, oh man, I'd love to tell you guys it was like 2 weeks and he was on his own, but this again was probably, within 60 days, he was handling most of it, but it probably took a good 6 months for this person to really get turn coordination done where we didn't have to oversee him and he was handling like 90% of the items. We had a leasing assistant, and this leasing assistant was, you can call it lease marketing. They're the ones that ran the CMAs. They're the ones that put all of the marketing in MLS, in Zillow. They're the ones that If any lease changes had to be done, they would change the lease. They would send the lease out. They would create the lease. This allowed the property managers to review it when they had to sign it. And so we did teach them how to create CMAs. And a leasing assistant, this is like a 30 to 60-day type of training. Especially if you have a lot of videos, and they would handle, again, they would be able to handle 80% of the CMAs, other 20%, maybe it was a duplex and there's only single families around. They didn't know how to do the CMA, but they could handle the majority of CMAs. And then the other ones went to the property manager. So what was happening is, instead of property manager handling all these redundant tasks that can be done pretty easily, they're only handling the ones that are a little bit more difficult to handle. And so the next one was an application specialist. This is just what it sounds like. They would work with the anybody who wanted to put an application in. They were the ones who would gather all the information, run the application. We actually had a little scoreboard that we created in Excel. They would enter all that information there, and then they would send that over to the property manager, and it would basically have like a scoring methodology, and the property manager would say yay or nay. So the product manager made the final call, but the call was really done based on the information that the application specialist put into the system. And so again, product manager, all I had to do was look at something for 10 seconds and be like, yep, it's good to go. Or no, it's not good to go. They didn't have to go out and gather all the information. They didn't have to go out and, you know, reach out to people because they only put a partial application in. So they were the ones that handle all of this. We had a move in and a move out specialist. So after the application is filled out, the lease is drafted up, the move in person would make sure they would work with the turn coordinator, make sure the turn was done, and they would work with the person moving in that got approved and tell them, and send them all the information about how we do business, how do you pay, how do you put in a call, a work order, all of that good stuff. And they were the ones that, when somebody came in, if there was any issues with the property, they would call them first. But so they made sure that the resident had a nice experience moving in. They also dealt with the resident on the move out. So they would handle the move out, making sure they got the keys, making sure the resident, handled all of the carpet cleaning, and they were the Empire representative for anybody who was moving out. They did not do the security deposit disposition. That was still handled by the property managers or accounting. We had two property accountants. They handled all of the property accounting. We actually had a US-based person handling the corporate books. So we had two property accountants down in Mexico, and we had Derek, who was our guy here in doing all the corporate accounting. So Derek would do all of our reconciliations, and he would handle the high level forecasting, budgeting, and our two property accountants would handle making sure everybody got paid, bills got entered, making sure that owner statements look good, things of that nature. We had two people that did onboarding and offboarding. Anytime somebody came on, we had to go gather all that information. Well, that's a pain in the butt for your highest paid person, like your property manager, handling that. So we had an onboarding person, and then of course the offboarding person. Utility specialists, believe it or not, we had two of them, because that was a challenge to gather all that information on utilities. What's the water company? What's the electric company? Turn it on, turn it off. So we had two people. They had to be on the phone a lot. So that took a lot of time. So we had two people doing utilities. We had a collections and eviction specialist. So we had one person for, I think at the time was 1,000 single family homes, or like right 900. They were in charge of collecting all the rent. They were in charge of sending a 3-day notice. They were in charge of, making sure that all rents were collected. And then they had a process, right? We send a 3-day notice at this time. You file the eviction at this time, all that good stuff. And they would run that whole part of the business. We had somebody that did lease renewals. Their job was to start the lease renewal process 4 months before the lease was being renewed. They would run CMAs. Actually, sorry, strike that. We didn't do CMAs. We actually had a policy that we increased rent 2% across the board. But they would call the owner, make sure the owner wanted to renew. They would call the resident, see if the resident wanted to renew. They would make sure that the annual inspection got processed before they would renew the lease. and they would handle they would create the lease renewals and they would handle all of that. We had a resident relations supervisor. So the move in, move out, collection specialist, lease renewal specialist, they all reported to the resident relations supervisor. And so that person was the overflow. That person made sure all those people did their job, hit their KPIs, were managed. And this person also took any escalation calls from the resident side of things. We had two assistant BDMs, or we call them inside sales reps, or ISRs, or ISDs, inside sales developers. Your salespeople are high eyes. They are not really good at detail, and we want them to sell. We don't want them to do run CMAs and create management agreements. That's what these assistants did. They were kind of the back office for the BDMs. We had a marketing assistant. We had a marketing manager in Houston, and he had an assistant. The assistant basically did all the stuff that the marketing manager gave him to do. We had a social media manager. So the social media manager ran all of our socials, made sure they hit their KPIs of getting engagement, getting people to like us, things of that nature. And then we had an executive assistant or an executive administrator. And then any call that came into our office, unless it was a call about a property, would go to the resident services team. So they answer all the calls. Actually, I had an office girl, and then every time the overflow was to the resident services team, and then they would transfer the call to the right company. All of these folks talk to both residents and owners. Our policy was multiple people can reach out to an owner, but when an owner called in, they got the property manager. The property manager would work with the team to get all the stuff, all the questions answered by the owner, and then the owner would then get the answers off from the property manager. However, if the lease assistant sent out communication with the owner and the owner replied directly back to the lease assistant can answer those calls. And so this is what it looks like as an org chart. So you see the blue are US people, the red are remote. You can actually download this org chart from our website. But this is what it looks like. So you see here, if you look at all the folks we had, the majority of them were remote. So what did the company look like after we hired the remote team? As we were able to grow, we were able to reduce our churn rate from 34% down to 22%, which was kind of in line. I would love to got that lower, but it was kind of in line. But think about every time a percentage saved in churn rate is money earned. So what that did is our revenue went up. And even though our payroll went up a little bit because we hired more and more people, but the amount of people we hired for the amount of payroll we're paying was a lot less than we had before. And because our revenue would go up, the payroll percentage of revenue went down from 56% to about 34%. And a service-based company should be around 30 to 34% is basically what you hear. I went from having team completely stressed to the team not working anymore after hours. They're still working, but just not after hours. They weren't stressed out. They weren't working weekends. And it reduced my overall churn on my team. And it allowed me to get rid of people that were not, quote unquote, A players, or to put them into a better spot where they can be more productive. We went from a reactive company to a proactive company. And so I told you, like, what do my property managers do? If they're not dealing with maintenance 80% of the time, well, we actually changed the name of property manager. We call them client relations specialist. I would have rather the term asset manager. I lost that battle. So client relations specialist. And they actually became inside sales reps. Now, if you're running a business right now, and the only time you call your owners is when there's an eviction or some kind of issue, right? The owner, every time that he sees your number across his phone, he gets agitated. He gets a little stomach ache. He doesn't want to answer the phone because he knows it's always bad news. Well, we started calling them just to say what's up. We started calling them to let them know we have potential deals. We started calling them just to build those relationships. And when you build a relationship, when you make a mistake, the chances of churn goes down. So my property managers or my asset managers became they were basically building relationships. And a funny thing happened is all of a sudden our clients, obviously reducing the churn, But they started talking about giving us referrals. They started giving us online reviews. They started giving us, client testimonials, which we then were able to use in our marketing and get more clients. Also, when before the remote team, we were unable to implement new processes. It was really difficult because every time I come back from a NARPM conference, I'd be like, "Oh my God, I got all these great ideas," and everybody would be like, "We're too busy just bailing water out of this sinking ship, and you want to implement new processes." Um, and so all of a sudden, new processes are welcomed by the team, because now it's like, oh my God, we could, it take us a little bit of time, but now we can go ahead and streamline stuff. We can go ahead and add more revenue. We can go ahead and make more money. So they were happy to do it. We were able to increase revenue through sales, even though we were called Empire Property Management and Realty. No one knew that we did realty. So people would sell their homes, not using us. People would buy homes from agents that told them they can lease a property for 2,500 when in reality they can only lease it for 1,800. And we got less complaints to the sales team, which is huge because if your sales team gets a lot of complaints, they stop selling. Like whether they do it on purpose, it's subconsciously they stop selling because they feel like you cannot handle the business and they don't want to get. They're very high feel high, you know, um, you know, they're very feely type people. So once they get a lot of complaints, they kind of shut down. So how do we train our folks? We train them over Zoom. We train by each process. So like we would take the lease renewal process and anybody who's involved in that process and your accounting team is always involved in it, they would get trained on that process. The person that actually owned the process could own the process and eventually they were able to modify the process or give us reasons on why they want to modify the process. I create a policy, they can modify process, they could not modify policy. We recorded that training and then team member watched the recording and they created the manual. Early on, I made the mistake that I would create the manual. They create the manual because now they're hearing you, they're watching you, and now they're writing it down. So they'll each way you can learn, they're doing it. The next day, I would start from the beginning of the process and I would have them train me on what they learned. So the team member teaches you on what they've learned. And then we would upload the recordings and we tag them for future reference. Um, and so that's how we did our VPM training. We would upload them to YouTube back then. Now we have Notion, we have other software that you can do. And then as they're going through the training, their first couple of weeks is they're getting trained by you, watching the videos, and then if you have any kind of Appfolio or Buildium software training or any kind of training, you could have them watch those videos. And of course, VPM has a ton of free training as well. So you can have them take the property management 101 courses, you have them take social media courses and all that stuff. And so that's how we train them. It's kind of the monkey see, monkey do approach. Once you have the videos, though, then you can just have them watch the videos. You still need to spend a lot of time with your new folks, whether they're virtual assistants or in the US in the very beginning, and then you have to manage them. And so having a weekly meeting with an agenda to go over any challenge they have. Your job in these weekly meetings is to solve any challenges that they have. That's your job. What can I do to make your job easier? Should be the question you ask every week. So you start off with a feel good, go over to KPI, solve challenges, go over any tasks that were due, and then ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, what rate your stress level. Because if somebody's stress level is a 10 plus for multiple weeks, chances are they are ready to leave you. So that's my presentation. We do, if you are looking for a virtual team member and you don't have time, you're not sure how to hire them, you don't have a great hiring process, we actually offer a Gold Glove service. It is a pay for service, but we will find your folks. We have a lifetime guarantee. And you also get access to, we actually have a marketplace where you get discounts and free stuff. And that's it. I'm gonna let's see if anybody has any questions, but it's a quick one. I hope I'm on time. Share there. Anybody any questions for me? Anybody still there? Yeah, people still there. All right. Yes, Rosie raised a hand. Go ahead, Rosie. I don't know how to unmute you. Paulina, Rosie raised her hand. Can you unmute her for me?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Hey, Rosie.
It seems like she
I got
can't.
you. I got her. Hey, Rosie.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. What's up?
Okay, wonderful. Hey, I have a quick question. So when it comes to maintenance, one of the things we would like for our virtual assistants to do would be to help us connecting utilities. Because as you mentioned, that takes so much time. I was wondering how you approached that as far as, utility companies sometimes need to have a deposit made or payments done. Did you have a company credit card? And how did you handle that? Because that might be a little sticky.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I did have a company credit card, and over time, I let my virtual team member have access to that company credit card so that they can use it. And of course, my property accountants would monitor that very closely. For the times that you actually need to bring a check into the water company, which we still have to do here in Houston in some of the mud districts, I had to have somebody local do it. And either I had one of my real estate agents or I had my field techs handle that. I would recommend that if you have an onboarding team, I would we moved our turn on and turn offs with the onboarding and offboarding team instead of maintenance, because maintenance was just way too busy for us. And if your maintenance isn't super busy and you can do it, leave it there. If not, I would consider looking on the onboarding and offboarding teams. Great question, though.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Anybody else have any questions? That was a lot of info and not a lot of time. So,
Sebastian Gomez is also raising his hand.
oh, okay. Who is?
Sebastian Gomez.
Oh, Sebastian. All right, we'll let him talk. Yes, Sebastian. What's up, brother?
Hey, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Hey, Pete, great presentation, man. Thanks for all the information. I am seriously considering you're using virtual assistants for a service company. Could you talk a bit more about how that directly relates to the property management industry and how I can utilize virtual assistants in my industry? I do landscape management.
Yeah, so we're actually at a course that we'll be putting out there next week on how to use virtual assistants for contractors. So
Beautiful.
thank you for the dovetail into the plug. So you basically what you have to do is look at your business, just like we look in property management. And if something can be done that does not need to be at the office or at a property, it can be done remotely. Then what you do is you write down if I know you're a smaller firm, so if you're a smaller firm, write down all the things that you don't like to do and create a job description from that. You'll find the stuff that you don't like to do are typically the they're typically the same type of personality profile that you don't like, and somebody else has that personality profile. So I'm a big fan of using DISC. So first, create a job description, determine what kind of personality profile for that job description, have them take a DISC test, which you can do in VPM Solutions. They actually can take DISC, and then from there you can then interview them. But having somebody that understands the job description, that you understand it, more importantly, they know what to do. You know what they're supposed to do. Create KPIs and then have the right personality profile. And then when you interview them on attitude. Do they have your core values? If if they have the core values, they're the right person. If they have the personality, that they're in the right seat, and the KPIs tells them to row in the right direction. And then you just have to train them and manage them. Easy.
Said than done, you mean.
Yeah,
Thanks so
easier
much
said
for
than
that.
done. You're welcome. All right. Anything in the chat? I got a couple in the chat here. Wesley, does your churn rate percent refer to employee turnover or client turnover? Oh, great question, Wesley. Sorry, I did not mention that. It was my client turnover. So 34% was client turnover. Andrew, how many units did you have to support that team of 23 years plus your local boots on the ground? Another good question. When we were all said and done, that was the the jobs that I showed you, the 23 plus the 10 or 11 people I had in the US, that was for right under 1,000 homes. We had 900 and I think 84, something like that, in 3 markets. We were in Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth. And so one of the things that I would recommend as you're growing your business, try to figure out the math. How many units, right? Like we always ask ourselves, if we were portfolio based, how many units can one property manager handle, right? If they're portfolio based, right? Well, when we got to the point, we knew because we were departmental, we knew that every time we got 250 units, we need to hire a maintenance coordinator. We need to hire, whatever it is. Like, so my rent collections guy, she was able to handle 1,000 units, right? So we didn't have to hire anybody for a while. Lease renewal girl, same thing. But my maintenance, it was like 250 units was maintenance. And my property managers, based on the help they got, we were able to get them to, I think we had 4, 3, 6, 9. So we were at I think we were almost 300 units per property manager. And they were like 50% full. Every one of them said they can get to 400 doors when we were all said and done. But great question. Rosie, how do you handle tasks that are required to be performed by a licensed realtor, contract leases, renewals, or visa license tags as well? They're not licensed. They can do all the prep work. They can't sign the lease, but they can write up a lease renewal. They just can't negotiate. So one of the reasons why we went to a policy of we increased the lease renewal 2% is because we didn't want to have negotiations. And we also looked at our historical data in Houston, Dallas, and it was about 2 to 3%. So we just went on the low side, 2%, and we increased it by not having to, once somebody wanted to negotiate the lease or the renewal, that went up to the property manager. So the VAs were able to do any kind of all the work to get you there, but once there was a negotiation, then that went to the property manager. Good question. Was that part of the MA with owners from the start? Was that part of the MA management agreement from the owners with the start? I don't know, Rosie, what you're asking there. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there. I'm going to let you speak again. Let's see how to talk. All right, Rosie, can you hear us? I think you can speak now if you like. These are great questions, by the way. All right. Anybody else have anything? Well, did the owners agree to the 2%? Oh, that's what you're asking. So she's asking about our lease renewals. Did the owners agree to 2%? No, we just put in the lease agreement that it was going to be 2%. I don't know if it was the right thing or wrong thing, but we very, very rarely got kickback from either the resident or the owner. Every once in a while, we would get some kickback and we would renegotiate a lease renewal. It was not ideal, but you're talking less than 5% of the time. And when you're doing 30 leases a month or 30 renewals a month, it saved us tons of time. So if I had to write a check every once in a while, I was okay with it because we were saving so much time and effort by just putting the 2% in. Hopefully that helps. Yep. You're welcome. Sean, was there a number of doors during your early growth that you felt you needed to handle yourself before you could offload tasks to your virtual team? This is a great question. Unfortunately, when I started, I had no idea about virtual team. So I can tell you that I hired a property accountant, US based, before I even managed 100 doors, because I knew that was not my strong suit. So, I just decided that I wasn't going to take a paycheck for a little while. So I think this all depends on, like I had a wife that was working. I had a house that was paid for. I started my business when I was 41. I have no kids. So, it was easy for me not to take a paycheck for a year. I think I paid myself $1,000 a month the first year. I slung real estate on the side, made about 70 grand that year, just slinging real estate. But I hired people. The first few years of my business, I very rarely took anything more than the minimum that I would take, and I invested it back in the business. I always, and because I was able to do this, Sean, right? I was able to do this because again, I had very little expenses, no kids. And of course that allowed me to build the business quicker, right? So it really depends on, on your life circumstances. Well, I will say this, most people manage 100 doors portfolio based by themselves. And at about 100 doors, they look for an assistant. And I'd go back to what I said earlier, write down all the stuff that you don't like to do and start offloading that. So hire an assistant, right? Just your executive assistant, assistant property manager, whatever you want to call them, and then give them all the things that you really hate doing. Let them build a job description. One of the mistakes that people do make in this experience though is that they try to make them do everything. And so again, if you have them do maintenance and lease renewals and lease ups and all this other stuff, they're really a property manager. What you need to do is give them like 2 or 3 processes. And I'm a big fan of giving processes versus checklists. And we could debate that as well as we want. But give them process, let them own the process. You're like, well, I have only 100 doors. I only have like 3 renewals a month. Great. Give them the renewal process, give them a maintenance process, and give them one other process. If you give them more than 3 processes, they tend not to learn. What would you say, Rosie? What would you say are some of the tasks that a VA could do for a real estate side? Yeah, we actually have some job descriptions built on VPM Solutions that you can look at. But the 3 things that come to my mind is an executive assistant, a appointment setter, and a transaction coordinator. Like you should have a VA do your transaction coordination. Like there's no reason not to have a VA do transaction coordinator, and there's no reason not to have an appointment setter. Those 2 things I think are some of the really low hanging fruit that you can have on the realty side. As a matter of fact, I actually have one of my realtor buddies. She is going to be building all 3 of those courses so that VAs can get certification in those 3 job roles. So excited for that. We're also building a leasing course, a lease assistant course that should be out mid-November, I think. So we're continuously trying to build courses so that it makes it easier so that when you look to hire on VPM, you can look at the disc profile. You can find a job description. You can find a disc profile for that job description. You can find a VA with that disc profile, and you can have them take a course that they have to test out and get a certification on. So this will get you 90% of the way there. You still have to interview them for, are they a good fit, and make sure what kind of work ethic and all that stuff that they have. But if they take a course, it means they have the ability to learn, it means that they like that subject. If they have the disc profile, it means they're a good fit for that job role, as long as you built the job role and understand the personality profile for that job role. And so we are trying to do everything we can to make it easier and easier. Matter of fact, one of the new updates we have is you'll be able to schedule interviews and click on a Google Hangout and interview them directly from VPM Solutions. So that's coming by the end of the month, we hope. Knock on wood. Awesome. You guys are great. I love all these questions. Thank you so much. If for any reason you still have more questions and you'd like to pick my brain one-on-one, email me directly, pete@vpmsolutions.com. I love telling people what to do. Just kidding. I love talking about this stuff, and I'll be more than happy to give you some free time, some time for some of my time for free to talk through some challenges that you're having with regards to hiring, growing, anything property management. Doesn't have to be about VAs. Be more than happy to talk through that. Again, it's pete@vpmsolutions.com. Just email me directly, and I'll shoot you my meeting link. And unless I have one here. No, I don't have my meeting link on my presentation. Paulina, make sure we solve that next time. So I have my meeting link there.
Of course.
All right. All right, guys. I'll stay here all day, but if you guys have any more questions, feel free to throw them out. I think we're done. Do we have any more questions? You're welcome, guys. I appreciate y'all. All right. Well, see you at the next. We'll see you at NARPM National next week. Come by our booth and say what's up to me. Love to meet you face to face. And feel free again, pete@vpmsolutions.com. And we'll see you on the next webinar. We have Errol Allen, how to build a process. This was the number one thing that was instrumental in how I went from chaos to clarity in my business. This is the guy that actually taught me how to do it, and he built all of our systems for Empire. So look forward to having you guys get scheduled for that one. All right, take care, everybody.